viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Folks, it's time for us to take back control of our government now before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, and our liberty. But to do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action. Only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. And this program is just about that. Today, we are pleased and honored to have as returning guest, economist Andy Sutton. Andy is formerly of the financial community. However, now he's involved for the sole purpose of blowing the whistle on the corruption and helping people around the globe become their own advocates. Andy, welcome back to Liberty Talk Radio.
Hey, thanks, Joe. I appreciate you having me back on again.
Well, Andy, I have to admit that I'm reaching a low point, and I don't know how low I can go, about not only about the economy, but the way we are, the way we're handling the economy from a governmental point of view. It seems that most decisions that are being made don't make much sense. The Republicans are supposed to be the free market guys, wanted to repeal Obamacare, but when they got their man in office, then it became repeal and replace. Now we're going to get Obamacare Part 2, but no one has spoken the two words, free market, and it's it's deliberate, and everything that they do seems to revolve around some sort of socialistic or communistic or fascist type of program, that leaves the individual with less freedom, increases our taxes, and exasperates the poor relations we have with people overseas. It doesn't seem that we're doing anything right. Maybe I'm just one of these, negative guys or something, but I don't see much going in the right direction.
No, and you mentioned three things, socialism, communism, fascism. Those are probably three of the most misunderstood terms, in the political economic dictionary. Socialism just being simply, and communism are along a continuum. On one side here, you have a totally free market. On the other side, you have communism. Totally free market, the free market determines everything. How all the factors of production are allocated, capital, labor, technology, land, things like that. And on the other side of the continuum, you have communism where the government or the state controls everything. And then you have all these different points in between on the continuum. So, where you happen, we've been drifting from the free market side towards the communistic side really for the past half century now on the economic side. And that's all I'm concerned with. And here's another thing. When you say communism, what do people think of? Well, they think of Stalin, they think of gulags and all that stuff, and that did happen under Stalin and communism, but that's not what communism is. Communism is an economic system. That's what people have. The other stuff, those are crimes against humanity, whatever. That's not what communism is. It's not little guys sneaking around in the bushes with red hats and wire snips, trying to take down our communication system. It's an economic system that these countries choose to embrace. Same for socialism. It's just another point on that continuum, not as extreme as communism. And then fascism is just when that's when you got the government and business basically in bed together. That's what we have. When you have an FDA that has 12 members on its panel to approve new drugs, and most of those people, I don't know what the number is right now, it's a revolving door between Big Pharma and the FDA. The banking system, it's a revolving door between the 12 major banks in the United States in the United States Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve. Agriculture, same thing. Big Agra, Department of Agriculture. It doesn't matter what part of the economy you look at, that's what you see. You see government in bed with business, vice versa, however you want to look at it. But that's what we have. So now how are you going to get a free market solution when you have big business in bed with government, all being driven by a bunch of people that aren't interested in free market, they're not interested in liberty, they're not interested in you making decisions for yourself? It's not going to happen. So this is the kind of crap that you're going to have to deal with when this is who we have in place. You know, and for all the talk last year about changing things and, you know, emptying the swamp and all that kind of, those are nice political sound bites. But when you look at what has actually taken place, it's the same old, same old. New boss is the same as the old boss. That's what it is. It hasn't changed at all. The policies are the same. What policies have we changed? Well, we're going to get rid of these free trade agreements, and they're going to be replaced with other free trade agreements. The WTO is still, you know, the main driving force between, you know, for global trade. Who runs the monetary system? The Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the House of Rothschild, whatever. It's the same. And the underpinning of it is this is a stack of funny money, by the way. I use it in a game with kids to define what inflation is, because people have such a hard time understanding what it is. And it's not people's fault. It's the fact that everybody distorts it. They make it out to be, well, it's this, it's, you know, it's the result of this, it's the result of that, it's a result of the other thing. You know, what's that old adage? Garbage in, garbage out. Yeah. If you don't give people good information, how are they going to process it and come out with a logical answer? They're not. Yeah. And that's what's been going on with, you know, the talk about the economic system, healthcare, trade, you know, the entitlement systems, the retirement, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, whatever. It's all the same stuff. And what it ends up doing, it doesn't make anybody better off. It makes everybody worse off to varying degrees. It's a totally distorted and rotten approach to running a country, running an economic system, and we do it not only at the federal level, we do it at the state level, we do it at the local level, and sadly, you know, for 95% of the households in this country, we do it at a household level too. Yeah. Because we're not, you know, we haven't been educated properly in how to behave economically, for lack of a better term.
You know, yeah. It's interesting. I recall when I was very young, my cousin Susan, and she was about, I guess about 3 years older than I was. She went to school, and I learned that she took a course that was called home economics. And of course, economics was such a big word to me at the time. And I remember passing by her school. I said, "Oh, I think my cousin Susan is up there somewhere. She's taking home economics." And it made sense to take a course in home economics. It augmented what you learned at home, and they had, you know, maybe some things in school that your parents may not be familiar with, and you can integrate one thing. It made sense, but most schools did away with home economics. You don't hear that anymore.
No, well, it's weird because economics actually comes from the Greek word oikonomia, and the Greek root oikonomia means to arrange. And when you look at the actual definition that Webster's has for economics, it's just the allocation or the arrangement of scarce resources.
Right.
That's what economics is. It's just, that's all. So it's how, you know, we have a finite amount of labor, land, capital, etc. How are we going to allocate it? Are we going to allocate it wisely, or are we going to allocate it foolishly? And you take a look at the policies over the past 50 years, and I keep stressing the 50-year thing because how many different administrations have we had in 50 years? How many different Congresses? How many different parties have had controls of various portions of government, whether it's the courts, the legislature, the executive branch? You've had probably all the possible combinations of division of power amongst these two idiotic heads that are off of the same hydra, basically, in charge of this whole thing, and yet the pathway has been totally the same, regardless of who's in charge for the last half century. I think a lot of it's connected to the loss of the gold standard. That's a personal opinion. That changed everything here. It sent us on a course of wanton and runaway debt at all levels, state, federal, household. It's, the average person is working to make payments. What is the government doing? Taxing to make payments. What are the states doing? They're taxing to make payments. Everybody's in debt at all levels. And it's not just here. I mean, you look at the UK, you look at Australia, you look at some of the other G20 countries, and it's the same thing there. And so this is not just an American problem. A lot of people think, oh, well, it's just the American debt. No, it's global. That dingbat from the IMF made a comment that the globe was, I think it was 152 trillion in debt, and that doesn't use the real calculation, the real methods, that you're supposed to use if you're actually following generally accepted accounting principles. That was just like current debt, not future unfunded debt. 152 trillion spread around about how many countries? Ours is about 20 trillion of that. So where's the other coming from? It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's a global problem. China has a debt problem. They're an economic superpower, or they're considered to be one, or a rising one, or some say a falling one, or a failing one. You look at Russia, their economy's not in the best shape. Nobody is. We certainly aren't.
Yeah.
The only reason we even have an economy is because we can borrow money, and we have a central bank that has the ability, for now, to generate large sums of money and inject them into the economy as debt to keep this thing going. And we have a population that's willing to borrow that money at interest, at high rates of interest in many cases, to keep this whole thing going. When people stop borrowing, and I always go back to that chart that I post on the blog, I'll probably post it again so people can see it. When we actually, in 2009, like right around the end to the beginning of 2011, consumers actually started paying off their debts. What did Washington do? Washington freaked out. What did the Fed do? The Fed freaked out. And they said, basically, if you won't borrow, then we're going to borrow on your behalf. And we'll tax you. See how you like them apples.
Why did they do that? Because they were afraid that the GDP will start going down. People would be buying less, saving more, and would slow down the economy. Was that the fear?
No, the fear is that, first of all, if you have people paying off debt and not borrowing, how do you inflate a fiat system when you have a ratio of 10 to 1? A reserve ratio of 10 to 1, 9 to 1. It's through borrowing. I deposit $1 in the bank, they lend 10 out. Now there's $10 in the system where there used to be just 1. So that's how you grow in a fiat system. It's through inflation. And these jerks have convinced people that, if you want to have economic growth, you need to have inflation. But inflation kills off the value of the dollar, so where's the growth? There's been no growth.
Yeah.
The growth is in the credit charts and the debt charts. That's where the growth is. You look at GDP, you strip out all these different forms of debt that people have taken on, GDP is flatlined.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Little bump here or there, some more recession than anything else. My model that I've been working on for the last 10 years, and it's been pretty accurate, said we entered a recession in 2006. We never left it.
Right.
The Bureau of Economic Analysis down in Washington, D.C. says that we exited the recession in 2009. They cited the stock market as the primary reason why we exited the recession. What the heck does the stock market have to do with the economy? I mean, really. When we know what they did with that, they took out all those AIG, all those crappy companies that went broke. What was the other one?
Not Goldman Sachs, but
Bank of America. wasn't them. There was another one they took out.
Yeah.
All the bad performers.
Lehman Brothers.
Yeah, well, they weren't part of the Dow, I don't think.
Okay.
I do believe they were part of the S&P 500, though.
Okay.
I'd have to look. But they took out the poor performers and they put in firms that were doing better.
Yeah. Well,
that's not a constant index then. And since when are financial firms in an industrial index to begin with?
Right.
The only thing they make is trouble.
Right.
So this is what we have to focus on. And I kind of said when we were setting this show up, maybe a good title would be Then and Now. What was going on then as opposed to what's going on now? And what were people doing 100 years ago or 75 years ago as opposed to what we do now? You've mentioned 100 times that, if there was another Great Depression, we'd never make it through because people aren't self-reliant anymore. People, even back in 2008 when everything was going nuts, people could still swipe their credit card and buy stuff. They thought for a year, that maybe that wasn't such a great idea, and maybe we should, shrink this debt a little bit. But then they started right back up again, and they've been going crazy ever since.
Yeah. Well, the economy is so different today, and whenever I get these conversations with business people about the economy, I go, the way I see it is that, when I was young, my mother would take a few dollars or give me a grocery list and give me specifically what to buy. So many slices of ham, thin, and she had everything down to the penny as exactly what I should buy. But also one thing, she didn't give me a credit card, she gave me cash. And I went down there and I bought exactly the amount of what the cash that she gave me. Now, the reason why I bring that up is that that's no surprise to anyone. Everyone knows that before we had credit cards, we paid cash. But at the result of that was at the end of the month, we had food in the house, but we had no debt because it was paid for. Today, we have food in the house, but we still owe the money on the food at the end of the month. And we continue to increase that debt month after month for the most part. So we're never making any strides forward. We're just digging our hole deeper while thinking that we're richer and richer because we possess more things. And obviously, that doesn't last forever. That you can do that for a short period of time. Mike Maloney brings out a good point. He said every 500 years or so, the economic prowess of the world travels from east to west and then west to east again. He says, we've seen the West, Europe and the United States in the past 500 years, come along technologically and whatever, and monetarily. He says, and now we see this shift going back to the east, which would mean Russia and China and India and Indochina, we used to call it, places like that. But you can see this happening, and we don't want to acknowledge that for some reason, but it is in fact happening.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's one of those things. It kind of flies in the face of what you were taught in school, that America's number one, and rah rah, wave the flag, and that's what we learn. And there's nothing wrong with patriotism and all that kind of stuff, but it's, if you look back at what the founders said about, the government that they gave us, the same thing can be said about an economy. You were given a republic. Now, can you maintain it? Can you hold it? Can you keep it? We were given a vibrant economy. Could we keep it? No, we didn't. We blew it. And now people want an instant fix because you can order something and have it show up at your door in 2 or 3 days. They want to do the same thing with the economy, and it doesn't work that way. It took 50 years to get here. If we're lucky, if we started today, we might get out of it in 50 years.
Yeah.
I guess it'd be more like double that, but I'm a pessimist, so I would say at least as long as it took you to get into trouble to get out of it. And the thing is, to get out of it, we're going to have to work our way out of it, and that is not something America wants to do.
Yeah.
because that's the only way. You can't print your way out of it. You can't, and they're learning now, this whole thing with Syria, the head-butting in North Korea. These are basically muscle-flexing economic wars being fought with militaries through proxies. Syria being Russia versus the United States through these groups that are running around in Syria over a pipeline. That's an economic war.
Right.
Being fought with militaries through a proxy. You look at North Korea. That's a Chinese ally, or Chinese asset, depending on how you want to look at it. And then you look at us. So we've got assets down there. The Chinese have assets down there. We're fighting an economic war with China through the proxy of North Korea. So, so we're learning, and guess what? We're not making any progress. We've been jerking around in the Middle East for how many years now, and we still haven't won Afghanistan. We still haven't won Iraq. We're not going to. It's the same reason Great Britain couldn't beat us back in 1775 to 1783. You're fighting against people for their homes and families. You're not going to beat them with hired mercenaries. The British hired the German Hessians to come and do their dirty work. We hire Blackwater. I know I'm going to get on the A list for saying that. Yeah. Blackwater, guess what? I don't care. We hire our own dirtbags to go in and do dirty work too. And guess what? They're getting beat. History, some things don't change. And this idea of painting groups as being bad so we can marginalize them, and then dominate them militarily, we're finding that we're running into a lot of resistance. So my point was, we're not going to print our way out of this. We're not going to borrow and spend our way out of this. And we're not going to be able to fight our way out of it either. So how are we going to get out of it? We're going to have to buckle up, tighten the belt, whatever analogy or slogan you want to use, and we're going to have to get to work. And America doesn't want to do that. Yeah. That's the problem.
Well, we had we're broke, and then we put in a budget for the military for I want to say $656 billion. It goes to Congress, and you'd think Congress would scream and say, wait, we're supposed to be cutting spending. We can't pay what we have now. We're broke. But no, they increased it by an additional $30 billion. And it's like $690 billion now, or $697 billion. Almost $700 billion for the military alone. I mean, now these people are supposed to be so damn smart. You're broke, and so what you do is you increase your spending. What are they thinking? I mean, isn't anyone, not one of them stand up and say, we're broke. We cannot afford this. We can't afford $250 billion. We should be closing our bases. We should take all our troops, bring them home, reduce the size of the military, and if someone attacks us, every man, woman, and child gets a rifle. You'll defend your country. I mean, to me, that makes sense. What we're doing is not only nonsense, it's beyond insanity. And these people are supposed to be so educated, and yet they talk about how our debt is unsustainable, and then they increase the military debt. What am I missing before I blow my top?
I think you already blew it. There's two things that are going on here. First of all is that revolving door that I was telling you about. These people go from military contractors, military companies, and they end up being on advisory boards for various, congressional subcommittees, so forth and so on. So it's infected that way. There's a lot of lobbying that goes on. I mean, it's like anything else. It's like any other industry. It's that whole fascism thing again. So you have that. And then you have the ridiculous school of economic thought known as Keynesianism, where when you have a flagging economy, you print more money, you spend it, you go into debt, deficit spending is encouraged, and you embrace this as a strategy for the long term. And that's exactly what we've done. And look at what it's gotten us. Absolutely nowhere. Well, I mean, it's gotten us further into the hole. Those are the two big things those are the two big reasons, I should say, why you're seeing the insanity going on. You have infected thought. Economics, see, here's the thing. Economics is a science. Science has laws. Nobody wants to look at it like that. They look at it as an art, like it's some ersatz debating society that, well, we think this, therefore that's the reality. That's bullcrap. Economics is what economics is. If I increase the money supply, the price level is going to go up. I can prove it 1,000 times over. Anybody else can. It's simple common sense. You inject more money into a system, a fixed system, you're going to raise the price levels. You're going to create inflation. That's a law. Well, we'll use price controls. Then you create other imbalances. Those are laws. So nobody wants to acknowledge that there's laws, because guess what? If there's no laws, then guess who makes the rules? We do. That's not how it works. And that's one of the big reasons why we're in this situation, is because of this infected thinking. And the failure, we're going to make economics whatever it needs to be to suit what we want to do right now. And that's what economics is going to be. And that's the bullcrap, pardon my strong language, that you see in the textbooks. You hear this crap. I went to graduate school. They taught Keynesianism there. I didn't buy it. I thought it was stupid. It didn't make sense. My classmates, oh yeah, that's great. I don't know what made me any better. I'm not any smarter than anybody else. Just different for some reason.
Well, did you ever disagree with your teacher, the professor, and say, hey, this doesn't hold water, and have a debate? Or were you concerned that if you did that, you wouldn't get a passing grade?
You had to be to a certain point, but it always got to the point in the debate where the professor would say, well, it's that way because I said so.
Okay.
And that was the end of the debate.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, well, you lost because I said so is not an argument.
Yeah.
That's not a valid argument. You don't get to do that.
Well, you
get to do that with little children when they go to put their hand on the hot stove. Why shouldn't I do that? Because I said so.
Yeah.
That works. But running a country or trying to teach how things work and then saying, well, it's that way because I said so, get out of here. I had a great professor taught my monetary policy class. My first year of grad school, was in exile from South Africa because this individual protested against apartheid, which was the system down there that was running roughshod over people 20 years ago when I started grad school. And the required reading for the class was Grider's Secrets of the Temple and G. Edward Griffin's Creature from Jekyll Island. And that's, I think, one of the big things that propelled me towards looking at things from a different perspective and at least having all the information and moving forward and making an informed decision. Without that, I don't know where I would have ended up. Maybe I'd have been one of these group speak folks. I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
everybody needs to get it from somewhere.
Yeah. Another thing, well, everything seems to concern me. I mean, I'll be honest with you. There's very few things that don't concern me today because nothing seems to be logical. People say, well, Trump is a businessman. He knows how to make decisions. He's not a government shrill. He's a businessman. But yet the decisions he makes deny him that title altogether. If he was a businessman, you know that you don't spend more money that you have, or that you don't borrow more money that you can't pay back or predict that you can pay back. And yet he puts in large budgets that we can't pay back. He increases the debt. We exceeded our debt ceiling. We have no debt ceiling. We're going beyond that. I mean, by all right, we should shut down the government altogether. And then,
is a violation of federal law.
He bombs the hell out of, places like Syria and places like Yemen. These people, of course, are a great threat to the United States. And to me, I don't think he has a brain cell working. And I get hell from my friends who are just Trumpites, that he can do no wrong. I said, but listen, I'm not anti-Trump. I'm against the way what he does. I mean, look at what he does. They say, well, he's a businessman. He knows what he's doing. And they have abdicated all the thinking and logic because he's a businessman. Well, he's a horrible businessman. I mean, no businessman says, well, we're in debt. We can't pay our debt. Let's go into more debt. I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. None of this makes any sense. Hey, I'm not an economist, but I think I can do better than he does.
Couldn't do any worse.
I'm sorry.
Couple things. First of all, he doesn't call the shots. All right. Second thing, big thing. He went bankrupt 6 times.
Right.
The forces, the people, the groups, whatever you want to call them, that call the policy shots for the major countries, they need figureheads. All right. So you got a country that's in trouble. It's in debt up to its eyeballs. Unemployment, not great. The living wage, not great. Household median income stinks. It's not growing. This whole kind of thing. You basically have stagnation of the economy. So we'll bring this business figure in, who's a household name, because of being on TV and having reality shows and all that kind of stuff and firing people and all this kind of crap. So perfect figurehead. He doesn't call the shots. The last retard they had in there, he was a perfect figurehead for the Fabian socialist movement. Guess what? He didn't call the shots. I'm not exactly 100% sure who does call the shots, but I know it's not the president. These guys are figureheads. G.W. Bush was the tough guy, cowboy boot, cowboy hat wearing Texan. He was the gun-toting Wyatt Earp. He was going to, be the tough guy. Perfect figurehead. But dopey. A little dopey too. So any kind of blunders, he's not that bright, but he's got a set of, on him. That kind of thing. They put these people in here that are the perfect figurehead for whatever the situation is going to be for that period of time, or whatever they think it's going to be for that period of time. So you look at who these figureheads have been and go back through the years. Hey, look at what happened in 1980. We got a tough-talking guy put in the White House when what? The economy was in trouble, unemployment was high, we had back-to-back recessions in 78, 79, 80, 81, that period. We had back-to-backers admitted by Bureau of Economic Analysis. Who do we bring in? Ronald Reagan. Tough-talking, cowboy gunslinging conservative. It's the person they need for the times. Same with GW. Old, Daddy Bush. Then we had Slick Willie. Same thing. Wanted to do more social things. That was the kind of figurehead role that he assumed. He was more interested in social stuff. They took their first shot at this fascist socialized medicine deal when he was in office in 1994. So excuse me. You have to take the figureheads with a grain of salt. And this is not. And again, like the debt. This is not just an American problem. This is a global problem. Yeah. A lot of these countries, you look at their leaders, especially the West. You look at Great Britain, the bozos they've had. Tony Blair? Really? That guy was a moron. But he was the right figurehead.
Yeah.
Sarkozy in France. Merkel. I mean, you just keep going. All these guys and gals that they bring in, they're the perfect figureheads for this thing. It's the opiate that the people need for that time. And, right now, in this, progression, along this road that we're on, we need another tough talker with a big mouth, who likes to, run that mouth. And exactly, that's what we got. Because now we're moving into this militarized economic warfare. Why do you think they're spending $700 billion on the military? They're doubling down, Joe. They know we can't get out of this any other way.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I figured the reason why they're increasing the military budget and keep the military going, because that's the only way that we're making most of our GDP now goes into making bombs, airplanes, jets, all this other military equipment. I mean, if we cut down that significantly to a average level of what everyone else spends, I think our entire economy would implode.
See, and that's one of the things I think Ron Paul talked about at one time. His thoughts on the interventionism globally was the same as yours. We should be trimming things down and bringing our guys home. And that was what the people wanted to hear after 8 years at GW. What did Barack Obama get up and promise? He was going to bring the troops home. We doubled the number of troops in some of these places under his leadership. But they're puppets.
Yeah, well, I know,
but that's what
even Trump is the same way. I mean, Trump said, he used to tweet, "There's no reason for us to be in Syria. We should pull out. It's none of our business." Now we have 6 bases in Syria. I mean, you go nuts when you hear these guys. I mean, when you hear what they say and then you see what they do, it's diametrically opposed to everything that they do. And when people say that, but Trump is a successful businessman, I say, wait a minute. Anybody who's been through 6 bankruptcies and 3 marriages, I would not say is very stable.
Point. Yeah. Again, look at the conundrum that we're in. We're in debt. We're broke, insolvent, whatever you want to call it. Larry Kolikoff comes on your show every so often.
Yes.
He gives you what his numbers are when you do it the right way about how bad it is.
Yeah, like 223 trillion was the last I heard from him, I think it was.
Yeah.
The total debt, unfunded at all.
You can't even comprehend that number.
Right.
If you stack dollar bills one on top of the other and did that many of them, it would probably go into another galaxy.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's how huge the number is. So we're not going to get out of it. It's not going to happen. They can nationalize all the IRAs, all the pension plans, the 401ks, the 403bs, all of it. Bail in the entire freaking country, and they wouldn't even come close. It'd be like shooting a BB gun at a freight train.
Yeah. But where does this lead to? I mean, they know how broke we are. I mean, we know. I mean, there's no secret. Everyone in the world knows we're totally broke. We list number 5 out of the top 5 countries that have the worst debt in relation to their economy. Of course, Japan is number 1, but most of that is internal money. People in Japan who are lending money to the government, so it's sort of internal, and they say, well, that makes a little bit of a difference. I don't think I understand that, but it does. Then you have Greece, you have Syria, let's say Japan, Greece, Syria, and then the United States. Italy, and then the United States. Well, we're among the totally bankrupt countries when you look at it. And yet we're spending like drunken sailors. Isn't anyone saying, hey, guys, it's getting worse. We can't pay our debt. We're making it worse. There is an end game to this. And when it happens, it's going to be catastrophic. Let's start planning as to who we're going to blame.
Well, see, here's the thing. It's like I said before. And you just pretty much outlined the whole thing. We're not going to get out of that debt. It's not going to happen. We need to the system needs to be reset, basically. It's like a computer. It needs to be rebooted.
Well, so when you say that, what do you mean by that, Andy? When you say it has to be reset, you mean the dollar has to be devaluated like they did in France when I was there in 1960, 10 to 1 or something?
No, that's not even going to do it. That's not going to be enough. It's going to have to be a new currency, under a global system, or at least several regional systems, and they'll back it with precious metals like they did before, and we'll start the same game all over again. And part of that will be, repudiation of debt. Everybody's going to agree to forgive everybody else's debt. That's the way. That's the only way that they're going to get out of it. But here's the thing. You're not really getting out of it, because what is still the same? The mindset. America has the entitlement mindset. I'm an American. I'm entitled to my big SUV and my McMansion and my whatever. I'm entitled to it, and I'm going to have it. That's not going to change, especially if there's no pain inflicted in the correction process. How do you take a little kid, and I know the liberals out there are going to love me for this. What do you do to a little kid when they misbehave? You swat their bottom. You inflict, you don't beat the kid. You inflict a little bit of pain. And what does that do? It corrects the behavior. Sometimes you have to do it several times. You think adults are any flippin' different?
Yeah.
Maybe we don't get a spanking, we get an economic spanking. But that's what America needs, is an economic spanking. We need to get taken out behind the woodshed and beaten by the likes of Ludwig von Mises, and Rothbard and Bastiat and the other great economists of the 18th and 19th century. And that's how the mindset gets changed. So giving us a new currency under the same exact system is going to get you what? They're going to just start digging the hole all over again. They know we're not going to get our way out of this by working. People don't want to work that hard. They know they can't print. You can't print enough money to cover 223 trillion. It can't be done. The dollar would be worth nothing. So they know they can't do that. They don't want people to lose confidence in the dollar, because then the economy just stops. There's a panic. People start trading. They don't want that. They got this inflationary fiat system going, and it's working pretty good for them right now. So they sure don't want that to happen. So what do? You double down on your military. And you fight, you bluff wars with Russia, you bluff wars with China. They might talk nice and shake hands for the cameras, but behind the scenes, look at what's going on. We're shaking hands with Putin while we're launching 59 or 60 Tomahawks into Syria, which Russia has basically said, this is our ally. So we're going to shake hands and smile on television and then launch missiles, a week later or a week before or whatever. Yeah. That worked out. Look at what happens. We're fighting an economic war in a military fashion. We're trying to. It's a war for economic superiority or survival, depending how you want to look at it. I would actually lean towards survival at this point.
Yeah. Well, Gerald Celente, my paisan from Hone Avenue in the Bronx, by the way, put out a chart and says, first you have a crash, which was, and we've had a few of them. Then you have a recession, which we've had. And then you have a currency war, which we're involved in now. Currency wars become trade wars, and after a trade war becomes a world war. And it seems that's exactly the formula that we're following. Yeah. I think Gerald Celente is absolutely correct. I mean, to me, it's inconceivable. We have Russia has an ally, Syria, which is really close, relatively close to the Russian border. We have 6 military bases there. Could you imagine if Russia had military bases in Mexico and Guatemala or what, in Central America? I mean, they couldn't launch the missiles fast enough. I can't understand that.
We have an example of that in recent history. Remember the Cuban Missile Crisis?
That's right. Absolutely.
Khrushchev parked some nukes on Cuba, and America went crazy. We went berserk in '61 when that happened. We went nuts. Everybody was building fallout shelters and bomb shelters in their backyards and all this stuff. We went crazy.
Right.
We were at the brink of nuclear war, but we do the same thing to somebody else, and we expect them to just bow down and say, yes, you're America, yes, we submit. That's bullcrap. I wouldn't do that, would you?
Oh, no. Well, the U.S. is losing its position as the world's reserve currency. It's the whole structure. We're losing it all. We know that. Everyone knows that. It's like, don't talk about the sickness you have, because if you don't talk about it, it'll go away. You'll be healthy after a while. But so we don't do anything about it. But we know it every day. It gets worse. So there's got to be an end game. Every time I think of an end game, it's all horrible. There is no sort of just downturn where we work our way out of it. We're too far. It seems we're too far gone. But maybe I'm just an eternal pessimist or something, and I'm starting to believe that because I don't see any way out at all. I see either a total correction which would destroy this nation the way it is right now, the way we're operating right now, or we go into a war which destroys everything. I don't see any way out of this thing.
The latter's not going to happen, I don't believe. I don't believe we're going to see an all-out war, because you have to remember that messes it up for everybody.
Oh yeah, that kills everything. Yeah, I understand that. But what's the alternative?
The big money people can't hide from that. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think you're in the end game right now. It's a slow end game. Everybody talks about this crash that's going to happen. All the analysts that I read and pay attention to and listen to talk about this big crash that comes at the end of this thing. I don't see it happening that way. I see a slide, and it's already been going on for 40 years. It started in 1971 when we went off the gold standard. Or you can even go back further and say it started in 1913 when we let a private central bank start controlling the supply of the money. That was when freedom and liberty and free markets started its gentle slide into oblivion. So take your pick on the starting point. There's a lot of milestones along that road. 1933, 71, 86 when America hit its first trillion in national debt. Back in 2012 when Ron Paul was campaigning for president, the national debt was 14 trillion. Now it's still 20 trillion. So what's that, a 40% increase in 5 years? Yeah. How the hell are we going to get out of that? We're not. They know this. Everybody knows it. Anybody who pays any attention knows it. But a crash isn't in anybody's, when I say anybody, I'm talking about the big money forces, the big players, the banks,
right,
the oligarchs, that sort of thing. It's not in their best interest. Their best interest is to fleece the sheep very slowly over time. You don't want to be the parasite that kills the host, because then the parasite dies too. You want to be the parasite that infects the host and bleeds it out as slowly as possible over time. This is going to be a long, gentle slide into wherever we end up. Yeah. And then you'll get your new currency, whatever, your new system, your new world order, whatever you want to call it. What you like to call it, the new world order. I've heard other, guys like Soros, they call it the ultimate utopia. I think the term was used. We'll get whatever the next concoction is. But the problem is, while that takes place, you're going to have 300-some million Americans and countless billions around the world that are going to become worse off to the benefit of the small few.
Right.
And it's not even 1%. It's more like 0.1%.
Right.
Or maybe even 0.1%.
Right.
It's a very small few. And the rest of us are going to be the ones that are going to get fleeced to their benefit. And it's going to take time.
All right. Then here's the question then, Andy.
How
do we make America great again? I mean, if someone knocked on your door and said, Andy, what do I do? I know this is not going to work out. I mean, it's logical. This is not going to work. What do I do? Help. Okay. Give me some advice. What do you tell the person?
Yeah, that all sounded pretty morose and downright depressive. Somebody knocks on my door and says, how do I get out of it? I say, look in the mirror. Look in your own backyard. What can you do to fix your own backyard? Don't worry about the country. You can't fix the country. I can't fix the country. We can sit here and talk all we want about the country, the globe, whatever. We're not going to fix that. We can fix our own backyards. You want to stay somewhat sane? Don't fall into the 95+% of America that spends 10, 12, 14 hours a day working to make payments every month.
Yeah. This
bank to that finance company. For what? For cheap Chinese electronics? I mean, seriously, that's what we've come down to. Crappy cars. You get a 10-year loan on a car that's going to last 6 or 7. Who in their right mind does that? Nobody. And pay 15%, 20%, whatever. Or a television set, or some other piece of junk that we have to have, that we've been told that if you want to be anybody in this country today, you want to be anybody in this society, you have to have the latest whatever, insert gizmo here. You know, you go into debt for this stuff, and people are literally, and when Joe, what it comes down to, you know, you got the stack of fake money here. What it's all about is labor. It's about labor. That money is nothing. Those dollar bills aren't worth anything. If you want riches monetarily, you need something that is homogeneous, scarce. Dollar bills aren't scarce. You can create them from a computer screen if you want to now. Not personally, but if you're the Federal Reserve.
What about the cryptocurrencies? Will that be the salvation for anyone, or is that just an alternate to what we're doing now?
It's a Venus flytrap. Cryptocurrencies. First of all, they can be tracked. The big selling point, and I know the scumbag that came up with cryptocurrency, the first one, Bitcoin. I call it something else, which I'm not going to say here because this is a family show, and we don't say those words on family shows. But yeah, I know the scumbag who came up with that whole system, and that particular individual sold it on anonymity. And the latest bunch of hacks that went around that took down, you know, rail systems and infrastructure around the world, and it was ransomware. They demanded a ransom, and they wanted it in cryptocurrencies of a particular variety. And the problem was the hackers didn't want to cash in the ransoms that they did get paid because they were afraid of getting caught because they broke the system. They knew it could be tracked. So the selling point, the anonymity is gone. They said, oh, well, there's going to be only a fixed number of these coins, and we're going to fix it that way. That's how we'll control their value. We just won't inflate. Well, that's gone too because they already added more,
right,
at least once.
Yeah, right.
So that's gone. So what's the point? The SEC wants to regulate them now as a security. I don't know if you saw about that.
Right.
For new offerings of these things, because they're saying, well, you know, since they're such a popular product, we want to regulate it now. So now you got the SEC involved. So where's the big selling point on this, other than swiping your phone in front of a reader and being able to pay for stuff? See, the young generation will go for that. The old generation, they're more of a cash mindset. At least cash, yeah, dollar bills aren't worth anything, but at least they're tangible. At least you can put your hands on them. You can hold them. You can put them in your pocket. You can lock them in a safe. You can bury them underground if you want to. It's something tangible. But they're not scarce. They have no intrinsic value. You take a gold coin, it's scarce. It has intrinsic value because it is scarce. People, I think, and a lot of people have seen that we need to get back to real money. And when you start to look in the mirror and say, what can I do about this? Well, the first thing you can do, get yourself the heck out of debt if you can. If you're not in debt, don't start. If you have a credit card, you go into a store, you don't buy something that you don't have cash to pay for.
Yeah.
You pay your bill in full every month. You don't live at the edge. It's not what you make, it's what you spend. So if you make a little, you spend a little. You'll be okay. I mean, obviously, if you don't make anything at all, you got issues there. But you know, you got to have a situation where you keep in mind it's what goes out that's more important than what comes in. You don't live. Beyond, we've been taught that, hey, it's okay to live beyond your means. You're entitled to it. It's your right as an American, right? Am I pulling your ropes here? I mean, that's what we've been taught.
Yes, right.
Don't buy it. It's baloney. It's not true. It's a fallacy. It's a ruse. Don't fall for it.
So
that's what I tell people.
Would you recommend that people have a certain percentage of their portfolio or their savings in precious metals like gold, silver, platinum, or whatever, you know, precious metals? You know, I like platinum, I think, because of scarcity, you know, and but
I would add your idea of nickels.
To nickels,
that.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's copper and nickel, and you know.
Yeah, you know, anything that's scarce. You know, back in, you know, thousands of years ago, people used beads, different rare stones. You know, that's another thing. Gems, not diamonds. The diamond is a racket.
Right.
I'm talking like rubies, emeralds, sapphires, things like that. Actual, genuine, scarce stones. There's a huge market for that. Yeah, Tanzanite, art. Art is even being used now as a store of wealth because people are recognizing that, hey, this dollar thing just isn't working. We need to find somewhere else to park our capital. So if you're not going to invest it in a new business or somebody else's new business, because you have to deal with a bank now if you want to do that, unless you want to do a person-to-person loan, where are you going to park it? And that's what one of the big questions is, people that do have some savings. Where do I put it? Right. I'll start with some silver coins. Get a few. Get some junk silver. Pre-64 dimes and quarters. The Washington quarters, the Mercury and Franklin dimes. They're 90% silver. Great store of wealth. Easy to carry around. And the great thing about it is they're recognizable. Anybody's going to look at one of those coins and recognize that as a U.S. coin. Right. It's not some generic thing that they look at. What the heck is that? No, this is, or silver eagles. They're recognizable too. Yeah. That's the kind of places where, and you don't go and put 100% of your money there either. I recommend people keep 3 months of expenses in cash out of a bank. Yeah. Because of the bail-in. Yeah. If there's 100 people listening to this show right now, I'd be surprised if more than 5 of them know what that even is. And I'm not insulting people either.
No, I understand that.
It's because the media is not telling them, and that's where they're listening. Right. You and I have talked about it. Graham and I have written about it. I wrote about it on my own. Other people have too. These are the things that people need to be paying attention to. That's what I would tell somebody who knocked on my door right now. Yeah. So it's not all bad. Start small. This is not going to be fixed by a president. You're looking at a pyramid. Your figurehead is all the way up here. We're all the way down here. But guess what? We're a lot bigger than the figurehead. All right? If this is going to get fixed at all, in any shape, way, or form, to any extent, it's going to come from the bottom up. People are going to have a change of heart and say, you know what? Yeah, I'm not entitled to anything, not even my next breath. I got to work. If I want it, I got to work for it.
But we understand that I think most people understand that, but in the event of a currency crisis, which people never want to talk about, they don't want to mention the term, it's like it's a taboo, but when the next currency crisis comes, the large base, the bottom, which is primarily those people, many of those people are on some sort of government subsidy, and that subsidy is not going to buy that same loaf of bread anymore because it's not going to be enough money. You're going to have riots all over the place. I mean, we have riots now because of an incident. A police officer may have arrested someone or shot someone while he was trying to steal something, and they feel it was prejudice. And you have the whole town is burnt down. But when people go at a store and the guy says, "I'm sorry, you don't have enough money to buy a container of milk or whatever," the first thing to do is loot the store. It's going to spread like wildfire. I don't see how you even stop that or how you could stop that.
You can't. I mean, that's going to, if something happens quickly, there's no way around that. No, you're absolutely right. There's too many people that are in precarious positions now that if their situation changes even the least bit, they're going to, it's going to be fight or die for them. And if you're somebody that has even a little bit, that's where you got to learn the self-sufficiency. Yeah. That's where you got to learn the financial restraint. Yeah. I recommend forming co-ops. Find some like-minded people. Start trading amongst yourselves. Everybody brings something to the table. Right. One person might be good at doing this. You might have a doctor. You might have a cobbler. Somebody. I don't think we have cobblers anymore. This is like a 1700s example, but everybody
an auto mechanic. Whatever. Right.
Yeah. Whatever. Yeah. Everybody brings something to the table. That co-op trades amongst each other. Yeah. You're not going to fix the problem totally with that, but you can mitigate the blow if there's a currency crisis, because you can say, oh, well, the neighbor and I, we trade and share food. We garden, we do this, we do that. It's already in place. Something happens, it's not going to eliminate the blow. It's going to soften the blow a little bit, though.
Yeah.
at this point, it's going to be really hard to escape totally what, the consequences of this, because, our whole system is based on basically a fraud. The whole dollar standard, petrodollar thing it's a house of cards. It's a paper tiger. And more people are becoming aware of it. And that's why you've seen the flight to some of these other things. In some cases good, some cases, in terms of cryptocurrencies, I think that's a bad idea, especially for somebody who really doesn't have a lot to park your wealth in something you can't even see and you're dependent on the internet for. Bad idea. Yeah. Just my opinion.
What do you think of, in fact, I tested my wife the other day. I said, I think we should start giving thought of maybe moving out of the country in case things, get bad around here. We should have a place outside the country that we can go to. And I thought she'd say, you can go, I'm not going. She says, that's a good idea. Even she said that. I said, she says, yeah, she said, we want to go. I said, well, we have friends in Ecuador. They like it there. She says, well, let's go down there and see what it's like. I mean, she was all for it, which shocked the heck out of me. But what's going to happen? What's going to happen to places like, I know Peter Schiff moved to Puerto Rico. And he liked moving to Puerto Rico because it's still an American colony, and he needed a passport. He went down there, bought a beautiful home down there at in the northeast corner, and he said you're really separated from the what's going on in the United States to a certain extent. But what about places that people like Belize and places like Ecuador and Chile and people? Doug Casey invited me and my wife down to Argentina. He owns a good squad of that place, and some people are moving to New Zealand and Thailand and even Vietnam. I mean, just to get away from the United States because they see what's going to happen, and they don't want to be near the United States when the system collapses. Do you think that's all fear mongering, or you think there's some logic behind that?
Well, it's like I said before. What I think we're going to have is a continued gentle slide. If something happens quickly, and you have this place in wherever, you're probably not going to get to it.
Yeah.
If something happens quickly, if we keep doing the slide thing, the gentle, what we've been having for basically the last, few decades, if that continues, you'll have plenty of opportunities to go. But you take a look at Puerto Rico. They're bankrupt.
Yeah, they're a total basket case.
And that, yes, they're an American colony, but this is not just a 48 states American problem. You need to look at, there's different firms that put out indexes of economic freedom, indexes of social freedom.
Right.
Look at some of those and see where, there's less regulation, less interference, from government, and more safety, less crime, those types of places. Yeah. There's a lot of resources out there where you can find this information. If people have the means to look into something like that, I mean, the way I look at it, I was born here. I'm going to die here. I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees. And I don't fault anybody or judge anybody who says, you know what, I've had enough, I'm taking my family and I'm getting out of here. I don't blame them in the least. I don't have anything against them. I got no fight with them. For me, I'm staying.
Okay. Well,
I'm not going to let a bunch of international bankers run me out of my country.
All right.
That's just the way I feel. So everybody has to make their own choice, though. And like I said, that's not passing judgment on anybody who chooses to do something different.
All right. Well, on that high note, we're out of time.
It's probably good. I think I see the black Tahoe pulling up now.
We chewed up a whole hour. So let me give you the last minute to wrap things up and advise our listeners how they may reach you or about your newsletter.
I would just encourage people just to pass the show around. I think we talked about a lot of very pertinent information during the last hour. Pass it to your friends. Share the YouTube link. I'm going to post it on my blog, andysutton.com. People can go there. They can share it from there. There's a little subscribe button where whenever there's a post, you can get an email. It's free. I don't charge for anything, don't ask for anything, don't want anything. It's kind of like what you do. I was given a lot when I was born in this country, so I feel the desire to give something back. So this is basically what I'm giving back. So there's no strings attached, no spam, no sharing the email, none of that crap. So AndySutton.com. I haven't been on there as much as I'd like to be, but I'm hoping that'll change here in the next month or so. I keep saying that, but I need you to, beat me down on that and get a fire on that.
Okay, Andy. Thank you so much, and I look forward. I hope you will accept that invitation to return at a later date.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. Okay. Thank you, as always, for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and my regards to your wife, please. Okay?
Thanks. All right. Okay. Take care.
Thank you. Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well, stay tuned.